Hey folks, Zach Osterman here, Insider Indianapolis Star. This is Mind Your Banners post game for Indiana 66, Tennessee 62. That was a long sentence, forgive me. Doing this one solo. Mike Neislick and I have obviously been doing these post game podcasts for football. We do plan to keep them for basketball. I did not make the trip to Knoxville today. Mike did. I'm not going to make Mike get on the, try to find some place at Thompson Bowling Arena to sort of sit down and quietly do this post game with me and long term, walk before you can run sort of way. We will try to put these together. Obviously, when we're in the arena together, we certainly will. We'll do the live reaction shows like we've been doing for football. It will at least try to put something together, maybe live, maybe not, maybe even some of these solo shows will be live as the season goes on, because sometimes one or the other of us will have to do it solo. But for tonight, we figured let's just keep this simple. It's still the preseason. Like I said, walk before you can run, but wanted to have this Mind Your Banners reaction show for you post-game because obviously it's a meaningful result for Indiana. It's just an exhibition. I think a really good game probably for both these teams. Tennessee hosted today. Both teams are ranked in the top 20. Indiana 66, Tennessee 62. Hoosiers had to grind this one out. That's not surprising. Tennessee, this is kind of what Rick Barnes' Tennessee does to you at its best. It makes you inefficient. Indiana only shot 41.7% from the field, although it did shoot almost 52% from the floor in the second half. Indiana was 4 of 19 from three. All four of those threes, Indiana was 0 of 11 in the first half from behind the three-point line, 4 of 8 in the second half, so obviously improved there. But, this is what Tennessee does to you. Indiana was only 10 of 23 on layups, only 18 fast break points, only average 0.943 points per possession, 18.6% turnover rate. That's not great either. But to grind through that, essentially, I think is probably the overarching takeaway that's really good for Indiana in this game. And we'll talk about some player-by-player reactions in a minute. But I think the biggest thing here is, the Tennessee crowd made it an atmosphere, probably not the most intimidating it'll ever be in that arena, but it made it a meaningful atmosphere, a meaningful road test for IU in a preseason setting. And Indiana really powered through. I think, Tennessee did not hit a field goal in the last 350 of the game. Indiana was very good defensively. Obviously, time will tell kind of where Tennessee is offensively. They're trying to replace Dalton Connect, who is going to be such a big piece of their offense that even if that offense does get better as the season goes on, you would imagine it's probably not really going to be operating at anywhere near full strength yet. But neither is Indiana's. And again, on the road against a really good defensive program, to be able to make the plays Indiana made down the stretch, the Malik Reneau three, a couple important mid-range jumpers, some free throws, really encouraging for Indiana. Kind of talk about some player-by-player performances, and we'll have some of this in both Mike's coverage and some stuff that I wrote. Mike's already got a quick reaction story up, some takeaways from the game. I've got player ratings coming and obviously if you're listening to this tomorrow, this is all already on indystar.com/sports and heraldtimesonline.com. If you're watching this and you haven't checked it yet, in sort of the immediate aftermath of this game, we're talking just before 6:00 on Sunday night. Go looking for that stuff because it should already be out there. And there will be some other bits and pieces coming both tonight, Sunday night, and then on into early next week. Miles Rice, a really good debut for Indiana, 20 points, 7 of 14, missed all 3 of his 3-point attempts. Obviously, Indiana will want that to improve. Best plus-minus on the team, though, 12 in plus 12 in the plus-minus, 4 assists, a couple rebounds, 6 of 8 from the free throw line, was playing through some cramps at the end and still made some key winning plays. I think you see when everyone was talking about the speed at which Miles Rice plays is just kind of a different dimension for this team. That was one of the big preseason talking points, kind of for IU players and coaches. And you could see that today. There were times when Tennessee, which is, again, a very good defensive team, both individually and collectively, and Tennessee just couldn't stay in front of him. Rice just had another gear nobody could match. Malik Reneau looked incredibly comfortable. 21 points, 8 of 12 from the floor, hit his only 3. It was that big one late in the game on kind of the pick and pop action with Miles Rice that should be, I think, obviously just one possession, but very encouraging if that can become at least a semi-consistent part of Indiana's offense. Reneau was also 4 or 5 from the free throw line, which you feel good about if you're Indiana. 8 rebounds, plus 10 in the plus minus. I mean, I would actually kind of, in a way, tie Umar Balo's sort of performance together with Malik Reneau's, and I'll talk more about that in a second. But from Indiana's perspective, Reneau was assertive. He was confident. He didn't make a lot of mistakes. He had a couple turnovers that are probably avoidable, but he didn't get in foul trouble. He didn't look really – Indiana didn't do a ton with him at the 5. It did – it probably did about as much with him at the 5 as it did with Langdon Hatton at the 5. But he didn't look uncomfortable. He didn't look lost defensively. And he – I think more than anything, he really grew into the game as it went on. He outscored every other player on – the floor in the second half. His 14 points were the most for any player in the second half, and that was on 5 of 7 shooting. He made all 3 of his free throws. His only 3 came in the second half. Played 31 minutes. I mean, it was he looked really comfortable. I think he looked really good with the guards that he was playing with, that suddenly there were players whose quickness and creativity and movement were opening things up for him, sort of going outside toward the rim, which Reneau is really good at. He's good posted up, but he's also very good when you can kind of get him moving toward the rim with the ball. And then the other thing I would say is Umar Balo, and I'm not going to go like just absolutely player by player on these reactions, but Umar Balo only had 6 points. He was only 3 of 8 from the floor. There were times where, frankly, he looked maybe a little bit sloppy offensively, fumbled the ball a little bit too much. He felt like maybe his footwork wasn't great. I was a little surprised at, in some cases where he was losing the physical battle with Felix Okpara, who obviously Indiana fans will know from his time at Ohio State. But the flip side is Balo's got 11 rebounds and a block in this game. And it's sort of, a year ago, we talked so much about the importance of Indiana's 2 big lineups, in no small part because Indiana's 2 best offensive options were usually its 2 bigs. And that meant that everything the ball had to find one or both of them on just about every possession they were on the floor together, because that was where Indiana's offense was. And a game like this, I think, is a reminder. I helped Adam Jardy from the Columbus Dispatch kind of curate the Big Ten preseason media poll. And I understood why a lot of people voted Umar Balo as potentially his preseason transfer of the year. He even got a couple votes as preseason player of the year. The thing is, Indiana doesn't need Umar Balo to be dominant. Indiana's got more offense in terms of like individual players that can create and score. This Indiana team probably has more offense on the floor at any given time than any team Mike Woodson's ever had, or at least the potential for it. Listen, it's one game. Let's not overreact, but at very least the potential for it, in the sense that Rice can get you a bucket. Mackenzie Mbako, really came alive in that second half, showed you he can get you a bucket. Kanan Carlisle was quiet today. It felt like he was hunting his offense and never really found it. But, his history as last year at Stanford tells you that it will come at times, at least, probably more consistently than it did today. And we know what Malik Reneau is capable of. I thought he looked even better today against high-major competition than he did at times last season. And so my point here is there are going to be games where it's okay for Umar Balo to have 6 points, because if he's protecting the rim, if he's contesting shots, Indiana, if you want to look at the paint points, Indiana outscored Tennessee 32-20 in the paint. Tennessee was only 5 of 12 on layups. That number stands out, 1, because they did not shoot well on layups, and 2, because they did not attempt many at all. Indiana shot 23 layups. Tennessee attempted 12. So Indiana almost doubled Tennessee up. It's shots around the rim, not counting dunks. Indiana's 3 or 4 on dunks. Tennessee made its only dunk. But the point is, Tennessee didn't even want to go to the rim. And the primary reason it didn't was Umar Balo. And what I'm trying to say here is, there are going to be nights where, for whatever reason, whether it's the matchup or foul trouble or injuries or whatever, or just what the defense is giving him, that Indiana needs Umar Balo to be more efficient and more dominant around the rim, particularly offensively. But there are also, I suspect, watching this team and sort of getting a feel for the complexion of this team, going to be nights when Indiana really doesn't need Umar Balo to be that much of an offensive presence, because it's going to be able to get its points from somewhere else, from Kanan Carlisle's shooting or Mackenzie Mbako's, sort of versatile game, from Malik Reneau, obviously, whose scoring bona fides have kind of been proven at this point, from Miles Rice, who I thought that was as encouraging of a debut as you probably, even a preseason debut, as you could probably have hoped for if you were Indiana, given everything you hoped Miles Rice can be for your team. There are going to be nights where it's okay for Umar Balo to just be a rim running presence offensively and a dominant interior presence defensively. All 11 of his rebounds, which were game high, come on the defensive end of the floor. Again, it felt like just, anecdotally, but watching the game, Tennessee had no interest in going to the rim or around the rim when Balo was in the game. And then at the other end of the floor, he was enough of a presence that even when Indiana was playing those two big lineups, Reneau had a lot more room to operate. Tennessee had to respect a little bit more perimeter game, even if Indiana kind of struggled to shoot the three at times, particularly in the first half, when they went 0 of 11. But also because Balo just commands so much space. You see this sometimes in the NBA. Bigs don't always have to go for 22 and 12 to have a good game. Sometimes what you need from your big man is just to be a dominant defensive presence, an impactful rim presence, and open some things up for teammates. Be the reason your team is so good, not just defending, but closing out defensive possessions with rebounds, and then take what the defense gives you at the other end of the floor. I thought Balo could have been better tonight. I suspect Mike Woodson would feel the same thing or feel the same way. But I also think I think there may be more nights this season than people would have thought, 3-4 months ago, where we get to the end of a game like this and Umar Balo has a stat line like this: 6 points, 11 rebounds, 2 fouls, 3 turnovers, a block, and 2 steals. And we actually say that was still pretty useful for Indiana because they didn't need him to be an offensive focal point. They needed him to be a focal point somewhere else, which was defensively and rebounding the ball, and let the game come to other players to get the scoring done. And I think the last thing you would say, just talking about Mackenzie Mbako, all 12 of his points came in the second half. He was 5 of 11 from the floor, but he was 5 of 7 from the floor in the second half. He hit a couple threes in the second half. A couple of rebounds in the second half as well. I think that was all his rebounds. He was definitely a little bit more switched on in the second half, I would say, also defensively. But obviously, you're encouraged when he sees some threes go down. I also thought it was interesting to see him make some mid-range shots in ISO situations because for a while now, it doesn't feel like Indiana's had, kind of consistently a player that in late shot clock situations can get on the ball, call for an isolation, and just get a good shot, for their skill set consistently against an opposition. Mackenzie Mbako is 6'8", 6'9", long arms. If you get into late clock situations, there are going to be times where, at least based on some of what we've seen from his mid-range at the end of last season and then carrying into a game like this, where you do wonder if Indiana is probably going to be able to look at Mackenzie Mbako and just sort of give him the ball, clear out for an isolation, and just let him go look for a mid-range game, thinking about somebody like Johnny Davis, thinking about somebody, in the recent past in the Big Ten. It's not a perfect comparison. Keegan Murray was much more of a three-point shooter, but someone like that when all else breaks down can get on the ball and can, because of both his shooting ability and also his size, it's going to be hard to guard in isolation a 6'8" player that can rise and shoot from the mid-range, because you've either got to put somebody on him that's big but slower than he is, and therefore you're risking a foul, and obviously Mbago statistically is a very good free throw shooter, or you're going to put somebody smaller on him and hope that they can contest adequately even if they're giving up size. So I think it's just that's one of those just sort of file it away in a drawer. Is that something that Indiana's kind of got in its pocket offensively this season? We've already done 14 minutes here, give or take. And I don't want to go crazy with this. I don't want to, especially because I'm just talking solo into the podcast machine here. But I think the last thing you would say is it is a good day for Indiana. This was, Mike Woodson, I suspect. Dre Galloway didn't play. Bryson Tucker didn't play. Ja'Kai Newton didn't play. The question was that all three of those were kind of injury related and more precautionary than anything else. So that that Indiana is not at full strength, and some of your rotations are going to be affected by that. And, some of the sort of the bench decisions that we saw are going to be affected by that. But I suspect Mike Woodson will have left this game really pleased with everything his team got out of it. They went on the road. like I said, Thompson Bowling was, if it wasn't sold out, it was pretty full. It was pretty loud. Everyone understood that there was nothing at stake. There was no concern if Indiana or Tennessee, either one, lost the game, but it was still competitive. It got a little chippy on the floor, nothing bad, but just, it was clear it meant something to both sides. And Indiana had to fight its way through on the road in a decently tough environment to get a result. I suspect Mike Woodson is going to feel like this trip was very much worth the effort. And I think he should, because I think, this is not me saying Indiana should be revised clear Big Ten favorite or put them in the top 5 in the country or anything like that. But I think Indiana has every right to be encouraged by a lot of elements of this performance. So Indiana 66, Tennessee 62. Hoosiers will come back home and play the second of their 2 preseason games at home against Marion on Friday night. We will podcast at some point midweek, probably wrap up some of this, and also obviously talk about the Washington win in football. Look ahead to the Michigan State game, a really big one. We'll see where Curtis Rourke is this week, whether Kurt Cignetti has any update on at noon Monday when we talk to him for his weekly press conference. For now, for the Indianapolis Star, I'm Zach Osterman. This has been Mind Your Banners Postgame. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you soon.